Hello, in this video for reading photographs, we will continue our discussion of Roland Barthes' theory of photography and how to interpret photographs. And we will focus on this important notion of the punctum. Now, what is the punctum for Roland Barthes? It is a main focal point in the photograph that triggers attention, that triggers an affect. Now here I think many of us will look to the radio in first place. Why could we consider this radio the punctum? Now, anyway, the radio was a technology that actually was one of the techniques that won the war. It was a very important development, and that also had a very bad reputation. Think about Nazi propaganda through radio. Now, after the war, all these technologies that drove the war became consumables. And certainly in the early 50s, the radio came to the wider public as something that you could use in a more handy way. Of course, people were listening the whole Second World War to radio, but it were quite clumsy installations that you couldn't easily put in your garden. With the rise of consumerism, all these benefits of technology would be available to the public wherever they were. And the radio was certainly one of the iconic versions of that. And this means that you will see in photography of the 50s a lot of fancy radios making an appearance. Now, while discussing the radio as a punctum, we shouldn't be too extreme in that. It depends also on the viewer and who is decoding the picture. I would also be okay when you would say, no, for me, the girl is the punctum. The girl is what triggers my affection to the photo and what allows me to jump into this photographic reality and to feel one with this episode of the 50s. Having this child being so sweet, listening to the radio, giving her mother some time for herself, might be the interesting narrative that you see in this photograph. So we are open to discussions. It's upon you. But anyway, the theory of Roland Barthes makes a lot of sense, that you try to trigger something with a point of attention in the image. Let's have a look to a second photograph. Here I think it's a little bit more clear. Both subjects are looking to the lighter that will light up the cigarette. Again, we are completely in the free world of the 50s, where the cigarette, which was a very handy packaging and industrialization of the smoking habit, was a kind of tool that you could carry on everywhere and that you could enjoy in the most different occasions. Again, this is very interesting to interpret the 50s because you will see these cigarettes everywhere. Women, men, in all kinds of conditions smoke in the car, in the garden, in the presence of children, while in the train, while on a plane even. And this had to do, of course, with the cigarette as a consumer product. And it's one of our criticism towards the 50s. The omnipresence of these consumer goods in media, such as newspaper outlets, magazines, later on in early 60s in film and TV, would convince people that it is quite natural to light a cigarette in all these conditions, and you would feel a little bit not knowing what to do with your hands if you don't have the hold of this cigarette. So again, a way to look at this photography from the 50s.